Hi, timely people. We're going to start. Welcome to the session on data. I'm honored to moderate the session where we're going to discuss the uses of data to promote pipeline safety. I'm very excited for this session because in addition to serving on the board of the Pipeline Safety Trust and being an engineer, I'm currently taking a course on data visualization. These guys know a lot more about it than I do, but I'm very happy to learn from them. So to start, I also want to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded the lands where we are meeting today. So earlier today, the National Transportation Safety Board Chair, Jennifer Hamady, said, and I'll paraphrase, that focusing on accidents and incidents alone may prevent discovering safety solutions. Her point was that we need to understand what is being done right as well as what went wrong. And by focusing on incidents alone, we are learning things after the fact. This session will cover how data, including data not now reported and provided to the public, can help reduce incidents. So the three presenters here today are Graham Emmerson from Canada. He's going to introduce what industry is doing on data. Blaine from PHMSA in DC. He will cover PHMSA's efforts to use data to address equity concerns. And James Eager with the Trust will present the work he's been pulling together to make data understandable and usable for the public. The session's going to have some interactivity, so we're going to have maybe somewhat shorter presentations, and then everyone in the audience will be able to ask questions to see whether there are capabilities that are either exist or may soon exist to answer data questions. We want to hear your ideas about what data you want to see and what data can help with preventing incidents, not just documenting them after the fact. So thanks to the presenters, and Graham, you're up.
If I close this, is it a problem? I can still close it. All right, I'll just do it. Perfect, yeah. All right. Okay. All right, it's getting on 4 o'clock. We're all in New Orleans, so I can tell this is the group that truly cares about pipeline safety, because you're all still here. So thank you, first and foremost, for sticking around. I've been doing, pipeline safety analysis in one form or another for about 16 years now. And honestly, what we're going to talk about today is really just scratching the surface on pipeline safety analysis and the data that's necessary, but it addresses what I found to be a persistent problem, which is just the general lack of standardization compared to other industries and how we treat incident data. And so that's kind of what we're going to get into here. Before I do, in pulling this together, I just did, a rudimentary Google search on, are pipelines safe? Because I wanted to see, kind of the data that's currently dominating the public pipeline, safety discourse. You can see these are all just cut and paste off page one, but right off the top, we've got comments that spills and leaks and ruptures are rare. They're a tiny percentage of throughput. Other comments, talk about the alternatives. Pipelines are the safest alternative. Then there's the but argument, which is, pipelines are generally safe, but, incidents happen. And then other perspectives that, pipelines aren't safe because incidents happen. And, whether you believe spills are rare or you believe they happen all the time, the core of all these pipeline safety perspectives is incidents. And when you uncover it, there's really only one source for that data, which is operating companies themselves. They're the ones, having the incidents. They're the ones reporting to regulators. The regulators are making things public. The operators are reporting these incidents on their own web pages, so on and so forth. It all comes down to the operator's data. And so, this is what has kind of led to the standardization efforts, is trying to get, industry treating their incident data and using it to reflect on performance the same way. Over the past, I would say 10 years, there's been, a number of really focused efforts to try and get this data, all on the same page, if you will. It seems really trivial to focus this much effort on just, what should be a simple naming exercise or bucketing exercise. But it's actually a real impediment to not be speaking the same language when it comes to the severity and the frequency of incident releases. In terms of what even defines an incident, go jurisdiction by jurisdictions. The regulators all have different views. And so you can't really compare across jurisdictions if you were to adopt one incident definition versus another. The operator's choice of metrics are probably maybe a little too opaque for public reporting and have been too inconsistent over time. And, the investment community has, they take a great deal of interest in whether operators are risking their money and taking on greater risk in the future liability. And so, they themselves are probably one of the biggest drivers for standardization, because you have all the investment indices, the ESG analysis, a plethora of organizations looking for information and all asking for the exact same data 1,000 different ways. And it was really, that as probably the driver for kind of a seed group of, companies to come together, working with industry associations and CSA to, try and write the first standard. So that was a CSA Z260 standard. It was published in 2019, and admittedly, it didn't get a lot of play in the US. And without the US market, it wasn't going to take hold. Now, fortunately, API had been working with that committee since the very beginning, and I'm really happy to say that API and CSA, competitors, are working together on their first joint standard for process safety metrics for the midstream operations. Okay, it's under development, and this is frankly my glorified infomercial for that standard. It's important to have these standards because pipeline safety, or process safety, if you will, it's a technical field, and with that comes a lot of jargon. So if you ask a simple question like, are pipelines safe? You're gonna get a nuanced answer, like, they're the safest alternative, or well, incidents are down this year, but volumes are up, and next year, we're steadily getting better. You'll get answers like that, or even if you got a simple, straightforward answer like yes, you just may not find it credible. And so, at the root of this is the fact that in these pipeline safety discourses, we can't communicate clearly and without a great deal of effort unless we're speaking the same language. These are meant to be objective and fact-based discussions. And so again, that's where that common language comes into play. It's the cornerstone for that open discourse. And once you establish that objective lens, then you get greater use. More companies start, adopting a methodology, reporting to it. More data becomes available. Because it's standardized, it becomes that much more transparent, and it grows. And so that was the purpose of the API 1186 CSA Z260 standardization effort. It was to create this common lexicon for pipeline safety. I mean, this is really the only slide with content from the standard because it pretty much sums it all up. It is meant to be simple nomenclature for metrics and classifying events. Okay. The metrics themselves are just, the counts of the different bucketed events. And so, by simple and objective nomenclature, it's a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, not applying any other labels to the categories. But, you start with tier 1. These are loss of primary containment events, leaks of greater consequences. Okay, these are everything from a fairly, I don't want to say routine, but a leak that could be uniformly defined to be consequential, like 10 barrels or 100 barrels or more, up to the catastrophic type events. Okay, it's a very wide band and intentionally so. Your tier 2 are these LOPC events of lesser consequence. They are the ones that are not going to make headlines, but they're ones that need to be captured, need to be investigated, need to be learned from. Tier 3 are any of those leaks that just are still too small to even fall into that tier 2 category, and all near misses. Anytime a safety system has to activate in response to an abnormal event, these are all tier 3 events. Tier 4, these are way down to the leading indicators when you start using them as metrics, but these are excursions from your operating procedures. These are non-conformances. They are indications that, okay, something has gone awry and it needs to be looked at. And so, the meaningfulness, because we've talked about, I think at every pipeline safety trust conference I've been to, meaningful metrics and, the need to be able to maybe get predictive. Well, the meaningfulness comes from the fact that, one, these are harm-based categories. Okay. Volume is in consideration, but largely the categorization is based on actual tangible harms, fatalities, oil and water, fires, okay? And the other part of the meaningfulness comes from the fact that, especially in the tier 3 and tier 4 range, every single event that gets categorized towards these metrics is something that is causal in nature. Okay, a tier 4 indicator could be missed inspections. Well, not any missed inspections. It's missed inspections because these are the things that are critical safety controls. They are inspections that really had to happen, and so that causality and this focus on the safety controls that are preventing leaks is what makes those leading indicators truly leading. Because if you've got abnormal events that keep happening and happening and happening, and you're not taking action to step in and correct them, then you're going to have more accidents. And so it's that causality that really, really makes the difference between an indicator that's just an artifact of your management systems and something that's truly related and causal in incidents. I mentioned that these are predominantly harms-based categorization. Fatalities, injuries, fires, contamination. Okay, and that is because volumes, they're difficult to understand, frankly. They don't have a lot of true impact. They're not necessarily a sign of risk realized, whereas these harms-based events, they are risk realized. Okay, I'm getting the flag here, so I have 2 minutes to step forward. So I'm good. That's probably enough on the content of the standard itself. There's Enbridge was an early adopter of this standardization approach, and I have to say we've gotten a lot of leverage out of it. We use these relatively small number of safety metrics, to be a mainstay of our reporting to senior leadership and the board. They tell us ultimately the performance of our operations, how we're doing. They tell us the performance of our programs and our management system. And that's really just even the tier 1s and tier 2s. We also use them as, within the management system itself. They give us something to base the procedures on, so we can set our investigation efforts commensurate with, the tiers, if you will. And that investigative rigor, when it's on the right opportunities for learning, your higher tier events, then it gives you a lot of data on what went wrong. And also gives you a lot of information for your process safety engineers to analyze and constantly and then look to see, okay, where are our controls a little weaker than they should be, and so on and so forth. It gives you something for benchmarking. And benchmarking in itself is it's nice to have. It really provides some motivation for companies to try and be the best. But the real thing about benchmarking is, once an industry association or someone steps up to launch benchmarking, then the entire membership adopts that way of speaking, that framework overnight. And it accelerates adoption of best practices. It also gets the conversation going amongst operators, because you sit down at the table and you're all going to talk about your tier 1 events, and you're going to share those learnings. And so we're not quite there yet. Certainly other high hazard industries do a lot more to support each other as companies, with assurance activities, with benchmarking, with industry performance metrics. And so, for us to get there, the first thing we've got to do is, I hope, pass the standard. It will be coming out before the end of the year for public review, and I hope everyone does take a chance to comment, and at least read it, because it's our first step. The next thing, as I mentioned, is benchmarking, and it's to increase and accelerate the adoption. I'd like to see adoption by industry associations. If we have API and CSA on board, that there's other associations that hopefully will follow suit. I'd like to see the regulators start using the standard and speaking the same language as the rest of industry. That's not to say adoption in regulation. And then the final thing is we got to keep the standard ever fresh. And for that, we've got to know, what's the next source of information? What are the next questions that industry and the public are looking for? So I'm going to turn it back here because I think we're going to just answer this question later or now?
Yeah, I think because we want to get to the interactive portion. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? And we're going to need a little time to switch computers. We'll just keep going, and then we'll have questions. Thanks, Graham.
All right, so can I get my slides, please? Thank you. So the Office of Pipeline Safety within PHMSA has been looking at social equity pretty much along with DOT, the other modes, and most of the federal government for the past few years during the Biden administration. So I wanted to give you an update on where we are with our social equity projects. Am I supposed to advance? What do I point at? There we go. So a little bit of evolution. We haven't been at it that long, but there's been some significant changes. Back in 2021, we looked for GIS layers that we could marry up our incident data with. And DOT was recommending the social vulnerability index data that was available from the Center for Disease Control. And they recommended that we use a very narrow band for high vulnerability from 0.9 to 1. And so we did it with our gas distribution incident data. And what we found out was that for the minority and language SVI, only 2.3% of the nation had that high vulnerability, and there was an annual average of 11 gas distribution incidents in those high vulnerability areas. So we decided that we really, we were a little leery about that because it's a very small part of the nation, a very low number of incidents. And then early in 2022, DOT came up with a replacement for the CDC's SVI layers, an interim DOT definition of a transportation disadvantaged community. And in that definition, it's a blended definition that uses 6 different transportation disadvantaged categories. And when we grabbed hold of that and started using it, we found that 30% of the nation is considered disadvantaged, and we had an annual average of 32 gas distribution incidents annually in that 30% of the nation. So it made us a little more comfortable in proceeding because it was a bigger chunk of the nation and captured some more of the incidents that were of use. Yeah, and now, sorry, since my lid got closed, my VPN dropped. I'm looking ahead here, trying to get ready. It's all right. I didn't think people would be here at the podium before me. So here's the 4 projects we've got planned. We're doing the gas distribution incidents. We're doing our excavation damage incidents, and that's for all system types. And then for gas transmission and hazardous liquid, the analysis is going to be a little different because we actually have mileage data to go with our gas transmission incidents and our hazardous liquid accidents. So when we do those 2 projects, we'll actually be generating an incident per mile rate, both in disadvantaged communities and in non-disadvantaged communities. For all those, we're going to be running calendar year 2012 through 2021 incident data. And the motivation there, we want to do the most recent 10 years of data for our incidents. Getting warmer. So the project components, so 4 projects, and each of them is going to have a GIS tool, which I'm hoping going to be able to demo for you at least 2 of those tools that allows you to visualize the incident locations. You can zoom to a state. You can access data about the layers that are in the tools, and filter by pipeline operator, filter by incident cause. The other thing that we are including is a spreadsheet so that stakeholders can do their own analysis of the data. So we're showing it to you in a GIS tool, but you will also be able to access the data so you can do whatever you want with the data. Getting warmer. So our future plan, so I covered a lot here, evolution, what we got, and what our plans for the future are. Each February, essentially, we complete another calendar year of incident and accident data. With our 30-day reporting lag, incidents that happen in December get reported to us in January. By the beginning of February, we say we've got a complete year of another complete year of incident and accident data. So our current plan is to update each of the 4 projects probably during the month of February, depending on how fast we can do it, so that we maintain visibility of the most recent 10 complete years of incident and accident data. And if you noticed, the DOT definition was labeled interim. That always makes me leery. So DOT may update that disadvantaged community layer, and if they do, the next time we roll in a new calendar year of data, we certainly plan to implement any changes to the disadvantaged community GIS layer that DOT might come up with. And we're ready for live demo. So there, you're going to throw a switch somewhere. Uh-oh.
There are a lot of codes. Contacting the mothership.
Blaine, are people going to be able to pull that data layer into their GIS system?
Are you asking about the transportation disadvantaged communities data layer?
Yeah.
You can already. If you, in the slides, there's a link. Okay, so I was ready for this.
It's not showing up on our system.
Yeah, I noticed that. So I got a couple screenshots that I'll throw up. Oh, well, I can't throw up the screenshots either. Yeah, so the disadvantaged interim definition of disadvantaged communities is available on the DOT website, so you can get that now. I know that industry has already done it. They wanted to they wanted to see if they could replicate our analysis, and they certainly did. So that GIS layer is out there. Our incident and accident data is available, and it's got the lat longs in it, which is what we used. So I wish I could show the tools to you, but they haven't been released for the public. If they released for the public, it would have been real easy. Just go to a website. But we're here trying to make my DOT connected laptop show it to us, and we're not having much success. Do you want to let James?
Yeah.
Well, James is going to be in the same boat probably. Okay, so why don't we do James do his presentation, and hopefully his computer will cooperate, and I'll maybe do it from the back.
Yes. 2-minute break. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Even less.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's great to be here. First conference for me. I started at the Pipeline Safety Trust almost a year ago. In a couple weeks it'll be a solid year. And I put this page up specifically because I guess you can't really read it, but the graph on the screen shows a date of 2015. And when I came into the trust, that was the state a lot of our data was in, a lot of our public-facing kind of presentation data was in. It was a lot of stuff that was made, very well thought out and put together by Rebecca and Carl over the years. But for the most part, they didn't have the capacity to kind of constantly be working on it and constantly be updating it and keeping it as up to date as possible with all of PHMSA's releases. So I came in with a pretty big task and started working with some pretty big data. I don't know how many of you have opened PHMSA's flagged files, but there's about 630 something columns and thousands of rows. So my first day was kind of like, okay, well, where do I start? And Carl and Blaine really each separately kind of took me through PHMSA's data, took me through their sort of Oracle database and their different data pages. And I started to orient myself and kind of feel out, not just how can we update what we have, which is still, as you can see, in progress, but how can we start to improve on how we share data with the public? Because there's plenty of work going on within the industry for how data is collected, maintained, shared. But our focus really, or my focus was coming in and saying, all right, well, people who, live near pipelines, people who are interested in these issues ought to have a better idea of what these issues really look like. So in that process, we started coming up with different public-facing projects that could kind of accomplish these goals. And one of those that some of you may have seen is our recurring state of safety, which we try to do monthly. Sometimes it turns into 6 weeks, but that's how time works. And this has been kind of an ongoing and evolving project. When we started, it started as an internal project, and I can't remember if it was Bill or Kenny or somebody at the trust that asked, hey, this is internal, but can we start doing this for every state, and can we put it out to the public instead of just looking at it ourselves? And of course, the answer was yes, and we started setting out to share data about each state, about their incident rates, about the operators in those states, and what causes incidents in those states. And recently we started, taking the draft posts to state regulators and asking them their opinion. And that not only helped us improve sort of the accuracy or the validity of what we were sharing, but it also helped us improve sort of the approach that we were taking in the first place. And I pulled up Minnesota specifically because this was the first state that we kind of took that process on with, and it was hugely educational and hugely beneficial to start doing that. So if there are any regulators in the room who haven't seen your state yet, I guess get ready. Might not be this year, and it might not be next year because there's 50 states, but we'll see, and I look forward to hearing from you when that time comes. But aside from this, and aside from updating everything from our briefing papers to graphs that we share on social media, we've also started thinking about how to make things more engaging for users and kind of bringing the data, not just literally from 2012 to 2022, but kind of figuratively. How can we make something that's, interactive, engaging, fun to look at, and fun to sort of play with, if you let me use that term. So the inspiration for what I'm going to kind of talk about today is something that Carl started several years ago that he had called the monthly perp walk. And this is the most recent monthly perp walk that was on our website. And if you zoom in on these dates, you'll see 2018, 2019. And this was just looking at the worst incident in each system in each month. And that was what the perp walk was. It was which operator, where, and how big was each incident. And it was an interesting project. I kind of gravitated towards it early on because this really distilled that pretty massive wall of data into like, okay, well, what's really bad and what's kind of temporal and relevant. So we took what was a spreadsheet basically, and we wanted to turn it into something that's a little more interactive that I'm going to have to refresh, and something that would be updated with a lot more regularity. If it loads reasonably quickly. There we go. And there we go. Nice little welcome screen for you. And this will be on our website soon. It's kind of going through a soft launch phase, which I'm going to plug right now if you want to be a part of that and kind of get early access and give me feedback. I'm sure some of you will have feedback for me today, which is, also always appreciated. But this is the same thing as that spreadsheet, effectively. It's just presented in a different way, and with a few more features to sort of give people a different look at what those sort of worst of the month incidents look like. And we also kind of changed the name. We're calling it the monthly incident dashboard, but that's, a separate conversation. So as you can see, we have each of the three sort of major systems, and you're looking at September's worst incidents. And you might think, well, how are you determining the worst incidents? The default, what Carl had done several years ago, was using release size. But we wanted to kind of give people the option to kind of determine the worst incidents based on what they might value. If you want to choose the worst incidents by the cost of the damage, you can do that. If you want to choose the worst incidents based on, say, deaths and injuries, you can also do that. And you'll notice that, especially when you use deaths and injuries, sometimes you don't have those every system every month. So that's accounted for as much as possible. And if you only want to look at one of the systems, you can do that too. And kind of crucially, this kind of lower left portion of the dashboard carries over to all the other tabs that you have up here. So if you're only concerned about one type of determinant and you're only concerned about one system, you don't have to change that every time you change tabs. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through these tabs so you folks can get at least a quick idea of what we're trying to do here. This next one is a table of operators that have appeared on the worst of the month list multiple times. And each operator, the parentheses, you see how many times they've appeared on the list. You see for which systems, and a total sum of deaths, injuries, evacuated members of the public. You see what percentage of those incidents caught on fire, exploded, and the total releases, and the total cost, and sort of all those pieces of data. And if you're really interested in one more than others, feel free to click on it, and it'll drop down with all the incidents that made that worst of the month list, which I really want to be clear about. This is not every incident for each operator. It's just the ones that made the worst list. And you can kind of move ahead to the monthly map where you see all the incidents in the month. You see the size based on whatever your determinant is. And you can click on circles and it'll tell you, all about that incident. And if you get lost, because, sometimes people do, you can always just go back to the start. And the last sort of important tab is this incident plotting tab, which, we added a few more controls, including a light and dark switch, which was requested by somebody, which, by the way, again, like feedback, please give it to me because I am always happy to implement requests if they're useful. And you can, I didn't mean for that to be funny, but you can change the size of these dots by different determinants as well, and it kind of has a similar feature where if you scroll over them, it shows you a little more information about each incident. And this is kind of a dorky thing that I added, but you can log the y-axis if you like seeing kind of the difference in, that there's a lot of bunching around the x-axis. This is kind of more of a wonky thing that I added there that most people probably won't use. And finally, I said that's the last kind of important tab. This is just the table of all the worst of the month incidents. And I really want to be clear about that because it's been part of the feedback that we've gotten, is that everything that you're seeing that comes in like a table form, I'm just talking about the worst incidents every month. And this table is completely sortable and searchable. So if you want to find, I won't use Enbridge, but I'll use Enterprise, I guess. And you can find all the incidents that, made the worst of the month list from Enterprise, for example, and a little bit of data on each of those. So, there's a few things to kind of click through and chew on. And if anybody's interested in testing it, please reach out to me, stop me, send me an email, whatever it is. reached me by one of the mice that are still scurrying around. If you haven't seen them, I've seen a couple since getting on the stage. They know where to reach me. But yeah, please let me know. I'm always interested in feedback from folks, especially folks who aren't as familiar with the data. That's been kind of the guiding question that I ask in a lot of meetings is who is our audience, and how can we make data products that reach our audience in ways that are understandable, that are comprehensible, and that are valid and credible. So yeah, that's I think that's my time because Kenny's about to raise the end of session. Hopefully Blaine is ready in the back, I think. Yes? Okay, great.
All right, so can you all hear me? I got another mic. Okay, oh, and you can see me. So this is what we have set up as our landing page for the GIS tools for equity. You see we've got a little blurb here about the Equity and Transportation Task Force and the executive orders that preceded the creation of the task force. And as I mentioned, our plan is to have 4 projects. Right now, we've got 2 of them in a ready state, and I'm going to show them to you. And then down here is a link to the DOT Justice 40 initiative site, and that includes the Transportation Disadvantaged dashboard link to get to that GIS layer. So click on the gas distribution, and you come to the gas distribution tool. Clever, isn't it? Come on. So this is our gas distribution pipeline incidents by state and by transportation disadvantaged community status. We say a little bit more about what the community's data is. You can click here to see a quick definition, and then a little bit about our GD incident reports. And as you can see here, our national values for gas distribution incidents, we had 1,058 in the 10-year period, and 319 in disadvantaged communities, 799 in non-disadvantaged. And then as I mentioned, you can click here and access the spreadsheet that gives you data about the incidents, data about the census tracts in the disadvantaged community layer. And here's the excavation damage front matter. Somebody talked earlier about getting geospatial data for leaks rather than for incidents. So here in the pipeline excavation damage write-up, we started out talking about something that we don't have GIS data for. Excavation damage is the leading cause of hazardous leaks on gas distribution facilities. And during just 2021, there were 76,000 hazardous leaks on gas distribution pipelines caused by excavation damage. That's a whole lot of GIS data that we don't have. You can see down here, 646 is the number of incidents across the 10-year period for all pipeline system types. And just in gas distribution, 76,000 hazardous leaks in a single calendar year. So if we want to take that plunge to GIS data for leaks, not just GIS data for incidents, it's a big plunge. Lots of leaks that we would need lat longs for. And then the rest of this front matter talks more about excavation damage and incidents, and again, links you back out to other places on our website where you can get more information about incidents, and click here to get to the spreadsheets. So that's the top of the tools. Each tool has 2 maps. So in the spirit of being in Louisiana, well, actually, let me cover the legend first. So the dots, the orange dots, are incidents that occurred in disadvantaged communities. The gray dots are in non-disadvantaged communities. The orangish hashing is disadvantaged community census tracts. And then that's not my music. The color shading is just an indication of the number of incidents in states. So let's look at Louisiana. You come over here. to the select a state and say, okay, I want to see Louisiana. And that's what you get. Let me move the legend out of the way. And then you also get a pop-up for the state of Louisiana. Here's how many gas distribution incidents there were in a 10-year period, how many are in non-disadvantaged areas, voila. So there's your state layer. Now, if I zoom in, oh, I did it the right direction. I almost always do the wrong direction first. So if you zoom in and click, you get more layers. You get the state layer because that's what you're in. And then you see here you're one of 4. Then you can go over and you can see about the incident, the year, the actual report ID, and this gas distribution 2013-0051. We've got all the data on our website if you want to find it. In the spreadsheet that I talked about, we have the key fields. You can see the cause of the incident, its county, and its disadvantaged status. Then the third layer, I had to grab the map. So this particular incident was sort of almost at this zoom level on the boundary of 2 census tracts. So from this position, maybe it was in this census tract with its FIPS number, or maybe it was in this census tract. If I zoomed in even more, I could probably make the system decide which census tract it's in. So that's your top map. Essentially, you go to a state, and then you see all the incidents, and it's really just a visual tool. I'm looking at a state, and I want to see, what are the incidents that have occurred in disadvantaged areas, and what are those that have occurred in non-disadvantaged areas. The bottom map, so that was one map. Here's 2 map. It has additional ways to filter. You can select by an operator ID. So if I go, okay, I'm in Louisiana again. No, I gotta wait till it builds. I'm in Louisiana again. I didn't wait long enough, I'm sorry. All right, are you done building? I'm in Louisiana. So now I can select an operator ID for Louisiana. The operator name will show up down here. We had a little bit of a problem. Some operators change their name. So 6240 might be in here with 2 different names. So we got a solution for that in out years, but for this first year, it's Washington Parish Gas Utility District number 2. And so that's their single incident. So it's pretty unexciting to do additional filtering. But for some of your larger operators that have more incidents than others, it could be 1 minute. Okay, like if you go to gas distribution or the excavation damage incidents, and here you can actually find operators in multiple states. If I select an operator, select an operator.
Hey, Blaine, should we take a question or two and you could let the audience know whether it's something that can be...
Yes, we can. So here's Colonial. There's Colonial Pipelines. And you don't get a real good zoom when you pick the operator. You got to sort of self-zoom after that. So you can do by state and then by operator, or you can do operator, then state. It's really up to you how you want to try to use this second map on the page with the filters. And that's it.
Okay, why don't we take a couple of questions for Blaine, a couple of questions for James, and end with Graham.
This is Scott Courier with TC Energy. First question here for Blaine. So really appreciate you walking us through this. Based on the data that your team's pulled together and the visualization of it, what kind of trends are you seeing? What are your takeaways from what we're looking at here with respect to trends?
We're really not looking to trend data. What we wanted to do is provide a visual tool where stakeholders can see incidents and see, are they in disadvantaged communities or are they not? As I said, our plan is to update them annually to have the most recent 10 years of data. So we're not talking performance targets. We're not talking trend analysis. We're talking a tool to see how incident locations overlay with disadvantaged communities.
But the observers can do their own kind of trend analysis, is that correct?
We're making the data available for stakeholders, yes, to do whatever they might want to do with it. And not to say we won't in the future, but right now our goals are fairly straightforward. We want to give you visual tools to see the incidents in the context of disadvantaged communities.
Will you be letting the broader audience of users like the media know that this tool is out there?
We're working on, we being PHMSA is working on a rollout plan. Not finished, but underway. So
Great.
that would involve, our social media and the usual things we do for a rollout plan.
Any other questions for Blaine?
Actually, I have a question for Graham.
Okay.
Yeah. First, thanks, Graham, for your presentation. My name is Jericho Perez from Kern River. Like they said, you can't improve what you can't measure. And my understanding is that CSA Z260 enabled your company to define the severity thresholds for pipeline performance. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
By implementing CSA Z260, were you able to quantitatively define your company's risk tolerance level? And are you also able to quantitatively measure the effect of any mitigation in terms of reducing the risk to your defined acceptable level?
So yes, but when it comes down to like risk tolerance and stuff, I think there's more effective tools in our toolbox where we get into, and it's probably not can't do it justice to get into the right level of detail, but we'll use like reliability targets rather than getting into risk tolerance. You take the standpoint that, well, no incident's acceptable. Let's get our reliability to a point where, this is, the incident becomes beyond plausible. Okay. And so, but in terms of, I would say more, frequent and retail presentations of performance, then that's where these tier ones and tier twos are there and useful for us. Because it's a very quick and simple snapshot at your performance. Number of tier ones this year versus last year versus here's the trend over 5 years. Like it's very simple stuff. You can blend the tier one and tier two metrics into an overall frequency, with weighted numbers and look at the overall impact for a period of time. And it's crude and it's not necessarily entirely intended to be this, but if you look at incidents as risk realized, then that frequency times the number of severity 1, severity 2 type events really does give you a risk profile, a realized risk profile. And so on Z260, one of the regulators that was working on the standard has actually pursued that as a way for themselves to categorize all the regulated companies. Because again, it's a realized risk profile that you get by looking at those frequencies and of the tier 1 and tier 2 events. And I say it's really good for that fast look. So yeah.
And just a quick comment for the audience, having spoken to Graham before today about his presentation. we were thinking about what kinds of data would be useful for prevention. And of course, that would be very interesting for everybody to think about. And one of the points that Graham made was the number of immediate repairs that are required, because that means there's something not quite right in what's going on in terms of prevention, that there needs an immediate response. So, another question?
Yeah, I think I'm next. Carl from the Pipeline Safety Trust, and this is for anybody. I think first maybe off to Graham. You know, it seems like we're getting more and more data and we're calling it different things. It used to be there was 2 or 3. There was incidents, serious incidents, significant incidents. Now with 1186, there's going to be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and now there's IPE. So there's like 8 or 9 different categories of incidents. So instead of making it easier for the public to understand, we're actually making it more complicated. And with the 1186, you know, anything under 420 gallons won't be reported at all to the public. Anything under 300,000 cubic feet won't be reported. And if you compare that to PHMSA, you're going to look at very different graphs. So if what we started with is trying to make it easier and more concise to understand, it seems like we've gone the wrong direction. So tell me how that's not true.
Well, so I would say, you know, if you are used to, you know, working just in the U.S., then yeah, you've got PHMSA and that's a tremendous data source, all at your fingertips and stuff. And you could rely on just that one national regulator. But then if you're dealing with stuff that doesn't get reported to PHMSA, you've got no basis for comparison. You know, I'm Canadian. I work for a company that runs pipelines across the border, and you know, there's no consistency between, you know, jurisdictions. And if I want to compare, you know, and as I've been often asked to do, is, well, how do we compare to some of our shippers in terms of performance? They got pipelines too. I can't answer that. And so it's about trying to get a lexicon for like the whole industry. It's the same, that tier 1, 2, 3, 4 is the same terminology that's used in the midstream and the refining sectors. It's the same terminology that's used in the upstream sectors. And so it is a change if you're used to like just PHMSA. If you're already working across jurisdictions, as a lot of industrial players are, and there's a lot of pipeline analysts, financial analysts are, then it's finally that consistency that you're looking for that allows you to make those comparisons. And so unfortunately, you know, it's something new to get used to, I would say. I don't think it's a step back. In terms of the IPEs were very helpful. They were very influential, and there's a pretty darn good line of sight between what's in the Z260, API 1186 definitions and PHMSA IPE. Okay. In terms of the last question, though, about, you know, like the minimum reporting volumes and stuff. So the data, let me back up a second. Probably one of the best uses for the standard is as filters for, you know, the public data repositories. You know, we've taken the frameworks and we've run the PHMSA data through it and be able to spit out, you know, like, okay, this company's got this pyramid, this company's got this pyramid, and what does it look like en masse? And so in terms of what companies report out, I'm gonna say, unfortunately, companies are gonna report what companies are gonna report. You can't force them to do something that they're not gonna do. But the reporting into PHMSA and the fact that you've still got this 5-gallon reporting criteria is still a value. And it's just a matter of when you're trying to sit down as an industry association and, you know, do some benchmarking. Or if I'm going to report out on Enbridge's performance at the, you know, in our corporate and social responsibility report, I'm going to use the tier 1 and tier 2, because, you know, alternative is I can use, you know, this indices requirements or this analyst requirements or any number of different definitions, and it's going to be all over the place. Well, now I can say, listen, apologies if this bothers anyone, but I'm just going to adopt the standard. This is what it is. And by the way, this is the exact same information we give our board of directors. And they see everything, but they see it as tier 1s, 2s, and 3s, and it's instantly recognizable. It instantly has meaning for them. So, yeah.
Bruce.
Is this on? Yeah. One for James and then one for Blaine and James. James, on the I couldn't see from back here, but on the monthly report that you had for one of the states, was that just significant incidents, or is it all reportable incidents? So it's even a broader database.
Which
Significant from PHMSA standards.
So when we're looking at the worst of the month,
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty much all significant.
Right.
But when you're looking at the map and the graph, that is just all incidents. But when you click or when you scroll to get the little info box, the tooltip, it does specify if it's significant or serious, along with some other information. Yeah.
Yeah, and I ask it just because when I saw the list, and this is 1 month, and I had this list of 20 for one state, I'm just going, what the heck? We got a long way to go. Anyway, the second question I have is to my impression, why we're doing this, gathering this data, is to make an impression, to impress upon states what's happening in their states, so maybe they can act on it, to impress upon companies what their record is, though they probably should know it, to get them to act on it, to sort of find out for the public and for the media who the bad actors are, who the good actors are, so we can really, move the needle forward. It's still early, but for both of you, what's the reaction from states and or companies with regard to this database that you're setting up?
And quick answers would be appreciated because we're out of time. Thanks.
I guess I'll answer first, and then Blaine, if you want to also give your input, that's great. The response that I've gotten from regulators and from folks in the industry has generally been positive. I mean, people seem helpful for the most part. Sometimes I get some pushback on specific things, but to me, it's been a learning process. I mean, again, it's been less than a year that I've been doing this. And even when, there is pushback, at least, maybe it's just the way that I'm taking it in, is it's always something to learn, whether it's just the way that the industry is used to seeing data, whether it's the way that, PHMSA is used to presenting data. It's all an opportunity to kind of go back to the trust and kind of discuss, why was this done for the past, however long, and are we okay with that still being the case? Are there conversations that we need to revisit and kind of reapproach how we share and present data to the public, really?
Yeah, and as far as our equity tools, we haven't made them available outside of PHMSA yet. So our state partners and the public haven't seen them yet.
Okay, let's give a round of applause to the presenters. Thanks, everybody, both on this panel and in the audience.